Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to show you how to make this absolutely stunning backflow incense burner. It's probably one of the prettiest pieces I've made in a long time, so I really do hope that you enjoy watching. We are going to start this diorama with the fizzy of your choosing. Once you've drunk that down at the speed of sound, you want to pour the contents of the remainder of the tin over your hand and your workspace to try and tell everybody that they need the bottom of the can. I literally just cut mine out using a very, very sharp pair of scissors. They're like fabric scissors, they cut literally everything. Clean up your workspace after you've poured everything out over yourself. And then you want to go and make a hole in the middle of it. I'm using a pin tool. I did think of some safety by using an old tea towel underneath so that I didn't poke a hole through my desk, but then I went back to being dangerous and used a sharp tool to make the hole bigger. Once I'd done that, I needed to venture into the great beyond. Not the great beyond, the great outdoors. It feels like the great beyond. That's enough of that. Once you have finished the great quest into the great outdoors, not the great beyond, bring in your log. My log, I needed to let it dry because it has been out all winter, so I did that by popping it in the oven for a good few hours. Now, I feel like I definitely need to say this. I have a fan-assisted oven, so there is no flame in my oven. Do not do this if you have an oven that has a flame in it, because that is how you start a fire. Do not put wood into an oven that has a fire in the back of it. But once my log had dried out, I went on to making the backflow incense burner. For this, I am using Fimo soft, not Fimo professional, because I don't know how anybody can use that stuff. You need hands of iron just to like knead it down so that you can actually use it. So I'm using Fimo soft. And I am literally just going to create some shelf mushrooms onto my dried log. I've decided to include the entire process of me doing that because I feel like this is probably the most important part. You'll also see once I've finished sculpting that I test it out to make sure that it's all working and that the smoke's going where I want it to, and actually it doesn't on my first attempt, so I have a little bit of a fiddle round and make sure like the smoke is actually falling down my mushrooms and not going wherever. So this is the bit where I do my test run. I'm literally just using some cheap, nasty incense. This stuff really does smell awful. But I need to see how the smoke is going to roll down my log. And as you can see on my first run, it starts trying to sort of creep over the top of the log. So I fiddle around with another piece of clay, being very careful not to knock the incense off because it will burn you. And I just sort of kept fiddling about with that mushroom until I figured out a way to stop the smoke from going over. Now you can see that the smoke is actually tumbling in the right direction and everything's going where it should be. I made that mushroom permanent by putting some bacon bond on the back of it and sculpting it in as I would all the others. And then I put it back into the oven. I'm going to say it again though, if you have a fire-based oven, please do not put a log in it. While my log was cooling down after it had finished baking, I decided to move on to making the crystals that would go around the log nearer the end of the video, but I thought I'd do this bit first just to make things very confusing. So to do the crystals, I literally just used some UV resin and some purple alcohol inks that I have. Mixed those in and then added these really cheap little fairy lights off of Amazon. They came in lots of different colours. I think it was like 6 different colours, so expect to see fairy lights in up and coming projects because I have more. And then yeah, I literally just stuck them into little crystal moulds, added my UV resin and then cured them. Once I have wasted an entire day of my life making resin crystals, it was finally on to making the armature of my owl. This is literally just some steel wire that I got from the gardening section of Tesco's. So you don't need to go spending a lot of money on like stuff that's meant for sculptures, because you can use stuff that's out like in the real world that doesn't cost you an arm and a leg. I'm going to bulk it out with some tin foil until I have an adequate sized baked potato. Once I have finished making my baked potato, I'm going to cover that in some polymer clay, super Sculpey polymer clay. I'm going to make the head the exact same way, except from I'm not making a baked potato, I'm going to make a new potato. I'm going to cover that in my polymer clay, and then once I've done that, I'm literally going to attach the head to the body using a cocktail stick and a little bit more polymer clay around the neck area, just so that everything's sort of held together and moulded together. And then you should be finished with a bowling pin. An oddly shaped bowling pin is what you should be ending up with. I wanted to make my own eyes for this owl purely because no matter what I'd looked at online and all the rest of it, I just couldn't find anything that I really wanted for him. So to make my resin eyes, it sounds complicated, but it really isn't. You just add in a tiny little drop of resin into the bottom of your mould, cure it, add a tiny layer of like glitter or something shiny, add another layer of UV resin, cure that, then add a layer of pearl mica powder over the top, which is what I'm doing now. Then add another tiny little bit of resin, cure it again. Then I went and did a black layer of mica powder, put another little blob of resin over the top, cured that, and there we go, I had an eye. I hope my explanation was useful. If not, just rewatch this part of the tutorial again, because I don't know how else to explain. Or you could just do the smart thing and purchase some off of Amazon. To attach your overly complicated resin eyes, or if you've taken the smart route and gone to Amazon and bought something, just create 2 holes using a large ball stylus and then put in a little bit of bacon bond in behind the eyes. The reason that I do this is to stop them popping out during the baking process, because there are times where the heat gets behind the eyes and they get pushed forward. So having that little bit of bacon bond at the back there stops the heat from getting behind them and popping them out. And then it was on to making this owl's face. Now, there are times I looked at this sculpt and thought, what on earth am I making? It was definitely a trust the process sculpt. At one point, he looks like an alien bowling pin. Then it goes to being an angry alien bowling pin. Yeah, I definitely had to just go with the flow, otherwise I think I might have thrown him all away, and I'm glad that I didn't. So sometimes you just have to trust that you're going in the right direction, even if you feel like you're not. At this stage, I literally had no idea where I was going with it, so I decided I would try and attach the beak just to try and give me some sort of way forward so that I could see what I was making. And actually doing that really helped me develop what I had in my head onto the clay. So I literally just adding the beak gave it some sort of meaning. It started looking like something, and I had something to work off. So if you're confused at what you're looking at when you're sculpting something and you find, I don't know what I'm doing here, add something else, whatever part it is, whether it's a nose, an ear, something like that, and you'll start seeing where you really do want to go with it. Once I had added the beak, I was then able to build up the bridge of the nose, and then I wanted this to be one of those sort of flat-faced looking owls. So then I created the rim around the edge of the face, and then I started actually seeing an owl. So yeah, just putting on the basic shapes sometimes will help you get past that horrible phase where you're like, what on earth is this? And once I got to this point, I could start seeing really where I wanted to go with him, which then transpired into me making flipping hundreds of tiny feathers. I won't bore you with all the feather making, but just know that I suffered making them all. Once I finished sculpting out his face, I decided that my owl needed antlers, because what owl doesn't have a set of antlers? To do that, I'm using that steel wire again and a little bit of floral wire just to hold them together. I am using cosclay instead of super Sculpey, although you can see the super Sculpey on the screen. This is cosclay, because it will stay nice and flexible after baking, which means I can then change the shape of the antlers if I want to. And it also means that when I am clumsy and whack it, they're not going to come off. I wanted these to kind of look like wood, though, not necessarily antlers, more of a headdress style set of antlers than actual antlers. Before I attached the antlers, I did actually put them into the oven for a bake, just so that I didn't squash the heck out of them trying to put them onto his head. I also cut them down a little bit because I realised that I had given him like giant moose antlers rather than nice little ones. These are still a little large, but I made them work in the end. When all the feathers were on it, they kind of looked smaller. I don't know how that works, but they work better once all the feathers of his head are on. Talking of which, that's what I'm going to start on now. I'm just using a circle cutter to create the smallest feathers on the face, and then I will go on to make the larger feathers by hand, which took me an age, but once again, I am nice enough not to have kept that entire footage in for you. I decided that this magical being needed a magical staff, but in order to get a magical staff, I had to go back outside, which I really didn't want to do because I'd already made one trip to the garden. So I sent Andy out to go and get me an adequate stick. I then created the staff off screen, mainly because I forgot to press record. But I made the staff, baked it, and then added the hand and the arm first, and then added the arm to the owl second, if that makes sense. Once I finished adding all the little details to the hand, so I added some knuckles to his weird hand wing thing, I went on to make the moth wings. This is probably the best part of the sculpture, and it's probably my favourite part of this owl. To make the wings, I literally just made one wing and used that as a template for all of the other wings. I also found that I have this amazing talent that I can use both my right hand and my left hand to sculpt. I'm doing it right now, and at 39 years old, I did not know I could do that. But yes, I went on to make 4 wings, so that it turned it into a moth-like robe rather than actual wings. I don't know if that translates into words, but I wanted to give him like a druid-style cloak using moth wings. I wanted there to be a connection between the 2 realms that he kind of lives in my head, and that was forest and celestial realms. So I gave him the Nordic rune for forest on his chest, and then went with traditional pagan swirls that quite often mean like creativity and stuff like that. Once I'd done that, I made mushrooms. Because you can't have a fantasy diorama without a shed ton of mushrooms. So I made lots and lots of mushrooms. Once I finished sculpting my mushrooms and got bored enough to create a whole little, I don't know, scene of mushrooms getting annoyed at one another coming off the screen, I put the entire owl into the oven. Once the owl was cooling down, me and my partner, we went on another adventure outside. This is definitely us and not stock images of some beautiful couple jumping into water. We definitely went on this adventure, and my adventure didn't look anything like this. Me walking to my car in the wet, me taking a very long drive in the grey wet for quite a long time. My hobbycraft seems to be quite far away. Continued walking in the wet. Oh, look, little people shoes. Got bored because I didn't get to go to the shop I wanted to. We had to go shoe shopping first. Finally got happy and started walking towards the place where I wanted to go, which was hobbycraft. I recorded my feet all the way into the shop, looking like an absolute weirdo until I got in here. And then found a load of stuff that I needed. I found this awesome little wooden round log slice. I found some milliput. I always need milliput. I separated these two. I'm very sorry. They might have been friends. Some of these teeny tiny pine cone things, which were in the wedding section aisle. And then I continued to spend the rest of my day in the rain because I hate being outside. But when I got home, it was on to the painting finally, which is my all-time favourite bit because this is the bit where your sculpture really comes to life. I have invested into some new paints. So now I have kind of moved away from my Arteza paints and I am moving on to Citadel colour paints and also my Vallejo Model Air paints. They are just much nicer paints. They move better, they have better coverage, and they just genuinely feel nicer to use. So I'm afraid it's probably goodbye to Arteza after many years of using their brand. But yeah, it was on to painting, which I started with my mushrooms, just because they would have been very hard to paint once I had attached them. So I decided to paint them first. Look at me, actually thinking forward. And then I went on to painting everything else. I will leave you with the painting montage, and I will jump back in nearer the end. Hello, I'm back. I bet you were loving the peace and quiet. But I needed to tell you how I attached my sculpture to the log round. So I mixed up a bit of milliput, which is an epoxy clay or epoxy putty. Once it has dried, it will literally dry rock solid. So these two components are not coming away from each other once that milliput is dry. I also used the milliput to disguise all the wiring for my crystals. It also means that I didn't need to put them into the oven because I was very concerned. They have a plastic battery pack, and if I had put that into the oven, I'm pretty sure would have turned into a melty mess. So using milliput is a good way to not have to do that. And also it air dries within 5 hours, so you don't really have to wait very long either. But yeah, I literally jammed all of my crystals in and my mushrooms, and then textured the milliput to kind of look like the same sort of moss that's on my owl's shoulders. Once it was dry, I painted all that up, and then went on to adding all of my diorama-y stuff. I decided I wanted to go with the traditional wise old owl thing as well, because he's an owl, you kind of have to. So I needed to make a few bits to go around him that gave him that, I don't know, scholarly feel about him as well. So I made this little table, of which I made Andy once again go back out into the great wide world to get me more wood. And then I sculpted some tiny candles and some tiny books, just so that I had, I don't know, some tiny bits to decorate the front part of this diorama with. I felt like that central space, this bit here, looked a bit empty. So I decided that I needed to put something in there. So this is what I came up with. I decided to make this teeny tiny little inkwell because I was donated this teeny tiny feather by my budgies. And it looked cute. I thought I'd share it with you, my budgies. Here they are. They are inventively named Big Blue and Little Blue. I can promise you that the feather was donated willingly. I did not chase them around or pull anything out of them. It was at the bottom of their cage when I cleaned them out. But I thought it was such a cute little feather. It needed a place on my owl diorama, so this was the perfect place for it. A little inkwell, so he has a proper feather quill. Now it's time to add all of my woodlandy bits and bobs. So I am literally using some moss that I bought from the wedding aisle of Hobbycraft, which is about £10 cheaper than going to the woodland scenics aisle of Hobbycraft to buy the same thing. So if you are going to get like moss and lichen and stuff like that, go down your wedding aisle first rather than down the expensive aisle. This, however, is woodland scenics. This is some of their bush stuff. I'm literally just mixing it with a bit of Mod Podge, and then I'm using my bare hands to attach it to the sculpture. Not because I don't have gloves, but more because I enjoy peeling the glue off afterwards. It's a guilty pleasure. Leave me alone. And then I went on to add some static grass. This is the first time I'm ever using a static grass applicator. I decided that I wanted to do 2 different types of grass. So I did this nice swirl design. I'm going to completely hide it with everything later on. But we both know, you know, you and I know that I have actually done it. This was so much fun. I now feel like I literally want to flock everything. It works really, really, really well. And I have to admit, it was fun to use. So yeah, I literally spent a long time playing with this afterwards, even though I had nothing else to flock. I was just flocking bits of wood after. I did learn, however, that if you're going to do something like this, flock first and then add all of your little bits and bobs, you know, all of your moss and stuff like that, because I did have to spend quite a long time getting grass out of moss. I then went on to add some of this scenic cement. It's basically a watered down Mod Podge. I spent a lot of money on that for what it is. However, it does work really well. Maybe spending a little bit more is worth it in this occasion. I didn't buy their spray bottle because once again it was £10 for a spray bottle. So I just used a pipette rather than spraying it on. Then I went on to glue down all of my other little bits and bobs. I did find gluing stuff hard because obviously the grass is in the way. So yeah, that took a little bit of persuasive gluing, i.e. I used a lot. But once I added in everything, that was pretty much this sculpture done. So thank you very much if you have spent all this time here with me, but it's been a very long video. I know that I don't normally do such long videos, but I used to. So if you do enjoy this format, having a video that's much, much longer and a little bit more descriptive, then please do send me a comment or hit the like button, just so that I know that's what you want from me. And if that is, I will continue doing slightly longer videos again. But yeah, after I finished like touching up the eyes with a little bit more resin just to bring them back to life, he was done. So I do hope that you've enjoyed watching. If you do, you know the usual, like, comment, hit that subscribe button if you're brand new. And thank you very much, guys. I will see you in the next one. Bye.